Hi, welcome to the HTML widgets topic video. We're going to go over some of the most common HTML widgets, make sure we can use a variety of the different input elements, understand and use various buttons, checkboxes, radio buttons, and labels, and be able to work with HTML widgets via DOM events. Okay, so we are going to be making graphical user interfaces. The readings to get you started is native form widgets from MDN. The one thing is we're going to be doing this independent of forms. Okay, because we don't need a form to be able to use these widgets because we've got JavaScript. References. The spec, the HTML5 spec, is actually pretty good. If you look here, we can see form, and then we see input elements, all the different types of input elements, explanations of them, and such like that. So if you need to get to the details, check out MDN, check out their references, but don't be scared. Oh, and you should use HTML 5.3 now, reference. Don't be scared to go look at the spec. HTML specs are readable. So inputs, what do they look like? Okay, well, the input tag has an attribute type, which indicates what it is. It can have an ID. It can have a value. What are those for? So we see there are a bunch of attributes. Okay, so let's take a live look. Okay, value. On getting, it must return the current value of the element. So, oh, this is live. How can this be live? High class. Oh, that's right. This isn't PowerPoint. This is an HTML page brought to life and turned into a slide presentation with JavaScript. If I come over here and come and take a look over here, we can see this input element has an ID in test1, meaning it's an input and it's a testing or showing off you guys want. Okay, so let's grab that. Okay, because remember, we've already learned about the DOM, so if we want to get this guy, we'll go my inputs equals, let's not mess with that. Input 1 equals document get element by ID. What was the ID? In test1. Okay, so we get the input. Now let's go input 1 dot value. Oh, return. So input 1 value is high class. So we're able to get the value. Can we set the value? Input 1 dot value equals is this thing on? Oh, changed right over here. Okay, so we can get and set the value in an input control. Users can type it in, we can get it. Name. Name is used when returning info from a form, or for buttons, we'll use it to set up a radio button group. We'll see what that is in a bit. Okay, so inputs. Okay, naturally, things that we want to use. Password field. A password field. What does it look like? Okay. Input type password field. Password address some short int. Okay. Let's go look at it live. Live example. Go to the inspector. Let's find this guy on the page. Right here, input in test1, type password. console. Okay, so let's see. Password pass1 equals document query. Oops, get element ID, and what do we say? In test2. Okay, so we're getting this input field. Input. Oh, sorry. Pass2, pass1. Sorry. Value. Wait. Don't use this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh. The only thing the password field does is it puts dots in there to prevent people from looking over your shoulder and seeing what you've typed in. Otherwise, there's nothing secure about this. Okay? People writing the JavaScript to take this value get the clear text, the regular unhidden text. There's no extra security precautions. The password field with the dots here, rather than showing you the character, is to prevent what we call shoulder surfing. Okay, otherwise, there's no other security associated with it. There are other input types. There's a variety of them, okay, and they do different things. URL and email actually do some basic checks. Numbers you can specify that it has to be a number, and you can specify ranges and stuff like that. Color will get you a color picker, etc. Okay. We can't go through every one, and you wouldn't remember it anyhow. So when I need something, I look it up. But one thing that I use a fair amount, okay, is text area, a multi-line input. It's got its own name, text area. Okay. And you can type anything you want here. Okay. Once again, it's got a value property so you can get all the text. Okay. It's got things that can control sizing and how the wrap works, and all sorts of stuff. Okay. Now, how do we work with these? We saw we can get the values, okay, if they type them. How do we know if a value has changed? Well, text inputs get two different types of events. They get an input event that fires whenever the user modifies the data of the control, okay? And the change event fires when the value is committed, if that makes sense for the control, okay? So that means like somebody hits enter, or you click your mouse someplace else, okay? So what might the handlers look like, okay? At the very end of this slideshow, I actually added this script as a script element, okay? So here's a change listener. It's listening for changes, okay? Console log, event, target, type. It's going to tell me something about the target. It's going to tell me it was a changed event, and then it's going to tell me the value. Okay. My input, this is for input events. Event, target, type. Input, target, event, target, value. Okay. Oh, and I'm going to set this. Target text area 1 is equal to the text area shown previously. Then I'm going to add my change and my input as event listeners to listen for changes and input events. So let's go back. Let's take a look. Oh, we see we got a lot of output here. So let's reduce things down. Okay, an input event was just fired over here because because I cleared out the input. Okay, so I changed what was in it. A text area change event was fired because I moved my mouse out of the text area over and clicked it in over here. Let's see what happens when I start doing some typing. What will, lots of input events. Okay, no change events. What if I do a carriage return? Oh, it's a text area. It doesn't really care about that. What if I click someplace outside? Oh, text area change. What will this do? Ooh, keyboard shortcuts. I do not know how I got that to come up. What will this do? Okay. So, if you want to wait till they leave the control, you listen for a change event. If you want to know about every character they type, you want an input event versus, okay. See all these input events, okay. I clicked outside and I get a change event because we took away the focus from it. Okay, so we get events. We can listen for things. Then we can go take actions. Okay, so do we do this? Of course we do this. Let's take a look at an example. Classroom. Okay, so this is the little classroom app that we've used. Here is a text area. I start typing here, and it does something here. This is a text area. Okay, so I type it, and every time I type, I take the output, run it through a markdown processor, and then put it into this area down below here. That's all I'm doing. I'm just listening to those, for those events, those input events. And every time the input changes, every time I get an input event, I go and update and run a markdown processor. Ah, cool. So even if you're using React and stuff like that, that doesn't mean that you won't have to know about these types of events. Okay? You do. You'll have slightly different ways of handling them, such like that, but we're still working with DOM events. Okay? Buttons and checkable items. Checkboxes. Notice this is an input of type checkbox. Okay. Checked is its state, is a state. Okay. If checked is present, makes the checkbox checked. Okay. The value is convenient in non-form cases to indicate the value of the selection. Okay. Checkbox live. Kind of minimalistic. Okay. So let's take a look. Let's go to our inspector. The nice thing is we can really just look at what's going on as we do things. Checkbox checked equals not. Okay. Checkbox. Now, one of the things that happens with checkboxes is that they can be small targets. Okay, the little box, and if you got fat fingers like me and you're trying to use checkboxes on a mobile device, what you can do is you can match a checkbox with a clickable label for easier use. Okay, and the syntax is fairly straightforward. You have to give your checkbox, your input checkbox, and ID. Then we say label for, okay, check me, okay, for the corresponding ID. What happens then is, check me out. I can click on the label to change the checkbox, as well as clicking on the checkbox. Okay. One of those little subtle things. Okay. Radio buttons. This comes from old-fashioned car radios where you press one button and it's the only one selected. Okay. You press another button, all the others are unselected. Okay. So how do we do this? Well, here we're going to show you a bunch of labels for the inputs. The type of the inputs are radio, and then we give one other thing. We give for the name, okay, we actually use the name even if we're not doing a form, okay? So here I say this is beverage group, okay? All these inputs get the same name, okay? And that allows this functionality. So when I click coffee, okay, key became unclicked. If I click cocoa, remember I'm using the label to help me click things, okay, coffee became unticked. That's the idea of a radio button. So when I make if I have a multiple choice question that only has one choice permitted, I'm going to give it in terms of radio buttons. If there can be many choices that you're allowed to select, I'll just use check boxes. Okay. These guys can take a bunch of inputs and change events. Okay. They both emit input and change events at the same time, so you only need to listen for one or the other. So here's my example code. Listen for these different changes. Okay, change, input, my change, my input. How can we see this? Oh, let's go back to the page with the controls. We're going to open up. Okay. Now remember, I gotta clear this out. You can do these examples yourself with my slides that you get from my page. Okay? So let's watch this. When I click coffee, we saw radio input, coffee, radio change, coffee. Okay? So we don't need to listen for both of those. They do the same thing because you're getting a change. Okay? And notice if I try and click the one that's already been done, I get a little visual indication, but there's no input change. Okay? And if you forget the behavior of any of these buttons or checkboxes or etc., just read up on the references. Okay? I mean, some of these things, if you haven't done graphical user interfaces, you're kind of like, what's that? Otherwise, this may be something you've seen before. Okay? There are two ways to specify buttons. One is as a type of input. Okay, so here we see the input tag, type button, value, this is an anonymous button. Okay. Or we can use the button tag. The button tag permits, there's an anonymous button. Oh, the button tag permits nested content. Using it with the input tag doesn't. Oh, so if I want nice HTML content, okay, let's use HTML content for its labels. Okay, that means I could put images in there or all sorts of things inside the opening and closing tags. The input elements are empty elements. The labels are inserted inside the value attributes and only plain text content. Okay. Button types. Just a plain old button, a submit button, which is a special button used with HTML forms, and a reset button, which is also a special button, type of button used with HTML forms. Okay. button events. What do they generate? Click events. So here's the code here. Okay, let's watch this. Oh, sorry. This one's easy to watch. So, but let's first double check what the code's doing. Inspector. Go select on this button element. The button element has the ID click test 1. So, as usual, we go and get a reference to the element with the DOM. Given that, we add the event listener. What's this event listener? We're going to listen for a click event. Buttons generate click event. And this super terse little bit of code here is something called an arrow function, which is an alternative short way of writing a function in JavaScript. And we'll deal with those a little bit more later. It's just too many different types of syntax. So we haven't actually hit arrow functions yet at this point. Now, if I click this button, it's going to do something. It's going to do whatever this says. It's going to alert button click. Oh, that's that boring little alert box that's annoying. Click me. And browsers know that that can be so annoying that they actually let you prevent the page from bringing that up. But we're doing it ourselves, so we are not concerned. Okay. Other widgets. Okay. There are other things out there. And we saw there's stuff for doing numbers. That's part of input. There's sliders, date and time pickers, file pickers, and stuff like that. Okay, those are all actually subsets of input. Okay, we can get color pickers, we can get date pickers, and such like that. Okay, these are all good. Even if you're going to want something that's like, more stylized, when you're doing your first prototyping, just use these. Okay, then go back, check to make sure there's good compatibility and things like that, and then you can worry about styling and all that. But it's nice to have these already and available. Okay, so those are available. Okay, but once again, more specific. You learn them as you need them. You read the documentation. What seems to be missing? Things like dialog boxes, things like tab panes, menu systems, drop-down menus, movable and resizable panels. I mean, we see those all over the place. Let's go look at another of mine. And here's this application thing that I wrote for an advanced graduate networking class to use. Okay, let me bring up. Oh, see, this is just from a website. Okay. I can bring up, look at this nice menu. Menu comes down, bring down example networks, medium size network. Okay. And I can say network, show me the network info. Oh, I get these little tab panes. I mean, I click and I can see links to the network. Okay, where do those come from, Professor? Okay. We see them all over. We actually create them with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Okay? You don't have to create them all yourselves. Okay? There are libraries out there for various different front-end frameworks. So this is libraries that I use with React. This happened to be React Bootstrap component, so this has a bootstrap look and feel. Okay, but these are all created with the HTML, the CSS, and JavaScript that we've learned or will continue to learn. Okay, so that's where those come from. Okay? So now I'm not saying that libraries don't make these easier. Here's my playlist editor. Okay, click Save Playlist. It goes and talks to the server and then comes back with a message, playlist saved, and it's nice what we call a modal dialog, and then I click Close the dialog. Okay, so there's patterns there, and it's worthwhile to, before you do everything by hand, try using, like I've done here, a framework or some pre-made components. When I do my initial development, I try and be as simple as possible and de-risk things. And then as I get more and more formal, I want things to look good, I'll bring in more libraries and things to help me do those things. Okay, that's a quick tour of HTML widgets.